This is not how I intended to do this at all. What I intended to do is go live with the laptop here and have the phone playing in the background, because I'm just going to sit here and do Sudoku. I don't know if you're familiar with Sudoku. It's a puzzle game where you fill in the blanks and you make each number go from 1 to 9, or each line has to have every numeral 1 to 9 in it in any particular order, but you can't double up on any number, and it has to go in each direction. So that's the distraction that I'm going to use, while in the meantime I'm going to have to put this behind me instead. I don't know, it's not at all what I intended. Oh. Not set up for this at all, but that's the fun of going live, is you never quite know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. So hopefully we can see that. It's bloody terrible, isn't it? Can you zoom in this mode? You can zoom. How about that? Now let's see if we can just click open on this image here. Don't know if you can zoom all the way into that, but don't tell me it's all going to do it in backwards as well. It's all going to do it in backwards, is it? I don't know. I can't even read. As I say, this isn't how I intended to do a live stream, but it is what it is. And I'm only doing it because I just want to share this information that's on this particular thing. And basically that just says false information in this post. Stories, fact-checking, and 3 others say this post has false information. To help stop the spread of false news, a notice will be added to your post if you decide. Visit Lead Stories, visit factcheck.org, visit PolitiFact, visit the Healthy Indian Project, visit Lead Stories, cancel or post anyway. So that's a screenshot from the person who posted this. Nora. I was tangled up like a king cobra. That was a pun intended, actually, by the way. Now, you just bear with me. This is a lame live stream for the moment, but I'm going to be doing Sudokus, right, just to pass the time. And meanwhile, I'm just going to play something in the background, if it's even going to play. And see, it's got false information, checked by independent fact checkers. You have to click on CY, C post, world premiere, watch the water. And then it takes you to Rumble. And then it's got a 3-minute introduction. I think we'll just scoot through most of that. Make it big. Can we make it bigger? No, that didn't work. Bloody hell, I'm so good at the internet. What about that one? Come on. Crappy bloody mouse from Wish. Give it some volume. There we go, 7 seconds. So in the meantime, I'm just going to sit here and do some Sudoku while we just calmly listen to what's playing in the background, because as far as I'm concerned, this is the way we're going to get around the censor. So I'm just going to fill in some numbers here while we just listen to what's going on in the background.
Ourselves off the air. We promised to never sell out to big pharma or globalist corporate sponsors or anybody else. And we've kept that promise. We promised to never stop fighting, to keep exposing everything until until there's literally nothing left to expose. Today we're going to air a documentary that highlights our commitment to that mission. I hope you're ready.
Now, I am a professional.
Another thing that we've highlighted on this show many, many times is how the entire
I wonder
COVID
if-
control regime is built on lies that have been exploded over and over again.
Bluetooth
It
mode.
started with the big lie
wonder
that
if I can
COVID
connect
wasn't
the
gonna
Bluetooth.
happen. And then it was just
Connected.
fear-mongering to even bring it up.
I'm connected.
Then it was the lie that masks would work and everyone had to wear them. There was the lie that children were at grave risk from this novel virus when they're
That's not
basically
working.
immune.
Okay.
And for their safety, there was the lie that we needed to close schools, but still yet allow our students to have unlimited access to our children via Zoom. There was the lie that for your own health, you needed to stay away from your friends and your family and your loved ones, to shut down your business. The lie to keep people away from treatments that the elites didn't approve of. The lie where they called ivermectin, a Nobel Prize-winning wonder drug, horse medicine. And then propagandized pharmacists into no longer prescribing. And most of all, the lies about vaccines. That they were safe, that they were effective, that they were well tested, that children and young people needed to
Disconnected.
get them, that they would stop the spread of COVID-19, that you needed a booster every few months to keep them effective, that this was a vaccine at all. The lies are everywhere, and they're always changing. And here at the Stu Peters Show, we try and dig up the truth, which is why we've welcomed a lot of guests from a wide variety of different backgrounds. We've talked with doctors, microscopy experts, whistleblowing nurses, tech entrepreneurs, and a whole lot more. One of the guests that we've spoken with is Dr. Brian Ardis. Dr. Ardis came onto our radar because of the pattern that we saw repeatedly playing out over and over again. Someone checks into the hospital, walks in under their own horsepower with a COVID diagnosis. Their condition rapidly deteriorates, they get put on a ventilator, and then they die. And we wanted to know, why does this keep happening? Was it really just how COVID-19 worked, or was something wrong with our treatment protocol? And if the protocol was wrong, why couldn't we fix it? Was it accidentally wrong or intentionally wrong? And Dr. Ardis was repeatedly asking himself the same thing. In early February of 2020, Dr. Ardis' father-in-law was killed, murdered in 9 days by a horrific drug
Connected.
protocol for the diagnosis of the flu. A couple of weeks after the first COVID cases hit Texas, in the 3 months of grieving and frustration that followed the death of his father-in-law, Weldon, Dr. Ardis discovered the alarming research studies on the failed and toxic drug called remdesivir. Drug that Anthony Fauci professed to have been proven safe and effective against the Ebola virus and against COVID-19.
Hopefully that makes the
only
sound
to
a little
discover
bit
through
more
his research
audible.
that remdesivir was even more toxic, more dangerous than the toxic antibiotic vancomycin used to destroy the kidneys of his father-in-law. I'm on the show to talk about the drug remdesivir, about how this drug that completely failed at treating Ebola, that causes kidney failure, renal failure, that costs a boatload of money, and that has a direct link to Tony Fauci, how that drug became the drug of choice in the COVID hospital protocol. It was a great discussion, but Dr. Ardis wasn't done. He continued to look for the full truth about COVID, and just a few weeks ago, he called me. He said, Stu, I need to meet with you in person. We've never met in person before. He said that it was urgent. He didn't want to send the information electronically. He said the information related to the origins of COVID-19, where it came from, what it really is, who's really responsible. He said that with that information he had, everything about COVID would come together. How they track it, how the CDC predicts hotspots, how people fall ill, how people die from COVID-19. I was skeptical. I always do. I said I needed to see some evidence. Well, we had our in-person meeting, and soon you'll be hearing what I heard. All I will say now is that my mind was blown, legitimately. I wasn't even sure how to respond, except for one thing. I knew the entire world needed to hear what Dr. Ardis was saying. And after praying on the topic, I knew that Dr. Ardis had to fly to Minnesota again for a special documentary-length interview to bring all of this information before the public, and so we did that. We held that interview, and for the past few weeks, we've been going through more than 4,000 pages of documents, some provided by Dr. Ardis, some that we've gathered on our own, all of which support his theory. And all I can say here is the more that we ask questions, the harder that we try to fact check all of this away. more our doubts started to feel unreasonable. I know that it's taken a while for this documentary to come out, but since we filmed that interview that's at the center of this documentary, I got swatted. I can't prove it, but I suspect these events are connected. We had to decentralize our production process to make sure that if they took out me or Dr. Artis or one of our editors, that it wouldn't stop this from coming out. It's that important. Had other issues. One of our editors was so distressed by the information in this documentary that they became ill. Another woke up in the middle of the night feeling like some external force was suffocating him, like some kind of a demonic attack. And maybe that sounds too wild to believe, but I want to say something. The way Dr. Artis had described how he started his investigation, all of the circumstances and coincidences that guided him down this path, I am convinced, and Brian believes, that God has helped guide him through the research process. Maybe that sounds sappy, but it shouldn't. The battle that we're fighting is a spiritual battle, more so than physical. This isn't a fight over policy. There is a war being waged in heaven, a war of good versus evil, and that means God versus Satan, being played out right here on earth for all of us to witness. Recently, Dr. Zev Zelenko spoke with us. He made an incredible sounding claim. He said that he'd heard from someone who would know that Dr. Artis is the #1 doctor that Pfizer wants silenced forever. Creating this documentary, all we have to say is that if Dr. Artis really is at the top of an assassination list, we're not surprised. And we think after watching this that you will probably agree. But before we start, though, we wanted to give you a chance to hear a few things from Dr. Artis, and he joins us now. Dr. Artis, thank you for coming, and thank you so much for your bravery.
Stu, it's an honor to be here. I just want to say on behalf of the entire world and you, thank you everyone who's put any faith and trust in me to be able to convey truth. There is no part of me who brought this information to Stu and started any of this research to create fear and panic. In fact, this is going to, I pray, bring light to all of those practitioners around the world who have already been right. And I want to convey that right now. Dr. Pierre Corey, you were right. Dr. Paul Merrick, you were right. Dr. Ben Marble and Zev Zelenko, you were right. Simone Gold, you were correct. Sherry Timpany, you were right. Everything you're about to learn in this documentary and all the research that I've actually conducted, Dr. Ryan Cole will be able to finally conclude why it is the findings under the slides, under a microscope, have become so monumentally evil. The amount of carnage and disease and death is unparalleled in history. This is the only reason why I'm bringing this to light. I pray that your heart, souls, and minds will be open to truth.
Just using
and
this
know
for
where to
commentary
go from
purpose,
here
mind
to
you.
protect your loved ones, your children, your grandparents, your parents, all those you love. I love you. And may God bless everyone on the earth.
Quite interesting.
So earlier this month, a lot of you may remember a post that I made on my Telegram channel. There was a lot of concern about the water and not to drink it. And there were certain things that I could say and could not say. And I referenced that certain people's lives might be at risk. And one of those people is here with me now, Dr. Brian Artis. Thanks a lot for being here.
I do really appreciate the opportunity to do this. Yeah, this is actually going to be the only time I've ever been nervous in any interview. I'm not kidding. Like, I've never been nervous to discuss anything in relationship to the COVID pandemic whatsoever. But this has bothered me and has scared me.
Putting things out is probably oftentimes the best way to protect yourself. But people have lost their lives over what you're about to tell the world.
I have to get this off my chest. My spirit's like screaming to say something and bring it to the forefront to protect as many innocent lives as possible. That's all I've been trying to do since May of 2020. As you know, when I read Anthony Fauci's memo on remdesivir, when I actually just hyperlinked, clicked the links to the studies that he was quoting saying that remdesivir was safe and effective, I knew right away that he was lying. I knew right away that this drug was going to be used to mass murder a whole bunch of innocent people in America that did not need to die. Then he was going to sell the world on the idea in the media that they were dying of a virus, when in fact I knew they were being poisoned to death with this drug. I knew 30% of all people were going to experience multiple organ failure, kidney failure, septic shock, and hypotension. That's what the studies said. Now we're a year and a half after that, and it's exactly the numbers that I said based on those studies. I'm pretty much called the remdesivir guy everywhere I go, which is odd for a retired chiropractor to be referenced as a pharmaceutical guy. But it is true, remdesivir is a very toxic, deadly drug. There are a lot of medical doctors and professionals who will mention that as it's just proven to be ineffective. It is not ineffective. It is very toxic and deadly. It is known and proven to actually injure specific organs in your body. It targets specific organs. This is a part of why I think my spirit is so moved to make sure this gets out, is that in January, January 21st of this year, so just 2 months ago, the FDA decided to authorize remdesivir as the only drug to be authorized to be used in all newborns in this country. I cannot even fathom the men or women in charge that would actually do that. So it's now been moved since January 21st of 2022. It's been moved out of hospitals as the only drug to be used, only allowed in hospitals this entire pandemic. Now they're moving it into in and out of hospital care for children as young as newborns 7 pounds heavy through the 18-year pediatric age range. It's the only authorized drug. There is nothing else that they're allowing for COVID-19 treatment. And I find that incredibly evil. And then they've also now canceled monoclonal antibody uses throughout the United States and all U.S. territories for COVID-19 early treatment, and they're moving remdesivir to the infusion centers where they were using monoclonal antibodies as the only IV infusion drug allowed. I have been moved with one singular purpose since May of 2020. When I read Anthony Fauci's memo about remdesivir, I felt this spark inside of me that I now had to go voice to the world a warning to try to protect as many innocent lives as possible from being killed. So let's talk about what happened. It all started with a text. There's a medical doctor that I admire and love because he is nonstop from the beginning of COVID. Has had the ability to project information and say to people around the world, you do not have to fear COVID. We have an answer. This guy has been on many stages with me. He still practices right now medicine and is an ER doc. And he sent me a text. It actually was dated December 1st. And I did not see it until like December 18th. I don't know how I didn't see it, but the text read, "Hey, Dr. Artis, if you got bit by a rattlesnake, would you go to a hospital and get anti-venom?" And I realized when I saw him that he must have saw an interview I did on InfoWars. So Kate Daly did an interview with me and wanted to go over my thoughts of monoclonal antibodies. Well, I had been given some research studies that actually bothered me. I didn't like the idea based on the data in these research studies. I didn't think monoclonal antibodies were safe long-term, not short-term, but long-term. Now, I read the actual text message, got in the shower, and while I was in the shower, I was sitting there thinking, why would he send me that text? It has nothing to do with COVID, like zero, nothing to do with COVID. So I'm going through this and I'm thinking about the text, and all my brain keeps going to is, why is he mentioning, wouldn't I go get anti-venom? Is there something about anti-venom I don't know? So I actually got out of the shower, went and got on the internet, and I wanted to know what is anti-venom? Only to find out that most antivenoms are monoclonal antibodies or polyclonal antibodies. And then I got it. Then I knew why he sent it to me. He wanted me to immediately see a question that he knew I would say, of course I would. If I got bit by a rattlesnake, of course I'm going to go to the hospital and get anti-venom. So in his mind, I think he knew this was a way, or God inspired him to send me this message, that Dr. Artis would be able to relate yes to the answer, then go figure out why it is he would say yes. Okay, this is where it all started. I will repeat what Steve Kirsch said to an audience with me last month. He said, if the CDC says something to do, you do the opposite. If the NIH says to do something, go the opposite. FDA, do the opposite. I'm sitting there realizing that antivenom is monoclonal antibodies, and then I immediately revert back to, in my own head, I'm not trusting anything the CDC, NIH, or FDA says. Is our federal health agencies, are they recommending monoclonal antibodies for COVID-19? Now, this is in the middle of December. No, they're not.
Right.
They've been bad-mouthing monoclonal antibodies this whole time.
Stripped them out of Florida when DeSantis wanted to use them.
And then January 21st of this year, they totally stripped out monoclonal antibodies. They do not want you touching monoclonal antibodies. They also didn't want you from the beginning to touch hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
They also don't want you touching ivermectin. They also don't want you touching NAC and acetylcysteine. So the things they tell you to avoid, we know they're telling you to avoid because they work. So when I realized that the federal health agencies actually were not supporting monoclonal antibodies, I mean, in an instant, I realized I was wrong.
Right.
That the CDC, NIH, and the FDA are bad-mouthing monoclonal antibodies for a reason. They know they work.
And we believe that this is because they want people intentionally to not recover.
Absolutely certain.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Oh, no, this actually got way more evil for me since I read that text than even before I read the text. I cannot believe the amount of evil behind this pandemic with what I've realized since then. I realized all of a sudden that monoclonal antibodies are anti-venom. The federal government doesn't want us using anti-venom. Why are they bashing anti-venom, and why are we finding anti-venom works against COVID? Is it not a virus? Is it a venom? Like, this is what I want to know. Like, is COVID a venom, and this is why they don't want you using monoclonal antibodies?
I mean, that sounds completely insane as a theory.
It is completely insane.
I mean, how would the masses be infected by snake bites?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you believe the mass media is controlled?
Of course.
You actually do believe that?
Yes.
So you believe that whatever's being pumped out in the media is being orchestrated and controlled?
Of course.
Like across all of it?
Across all of
Okay, good. All right, so in my head, I was like, okay, how do they keep people on that story? So there's this mass media group who are telling a huge story. They're all telling the same story around the world. Whenever anybody says anything against that narrative, what do they use now to combat that in the mainstream media?
it. Disinformation.
Yeah, they call them fact checkers.
Yeah, fact checkers, yeah.
Fact checkers.
Checking is the opposite of fact checking.
The arbiters of lies are the fact checkers.
By definition, fact checkers are to divert you from truth and take you back to a narrative you're being sold worldwide.
Right.
If it's
Can I get
true,
an amen?
if it's true that COVID could actually be snake venom, and how I got there was they don't support the use of anti-venom called monoclonal antibodies because they work. The easiest way to figure that out is, has that ever been fact-checked? And I wanted to know, was there ever any mention that the source could have been a snake?
And
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Over and over and over in the media, in January, in February of 2020, are non-stop publications that the original source could either be from bats, snakes, or pangolins. And every time the snake is mentioned, fact checkers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, constantly fact check it and spin it to the bats. There's no fact checking about bats. They keep letting you look at bats. In the beginning, in January of 2020, the scientists inside of China said this can't be from these bats. These bats hibernate and it's the winter. When they did genetic sequences from the antibodies in the people who were sick in Wuhan, they found that their genetic sequence was not most like bats. They were most like two snakes. Proteins from the Chinese crate and the king cobra. Then I find in April of 2020, there's a research study published in France
Where's the crown?
where they're finding that the receptors in the brain called nicotinic acetylcholinesterase receptors, that these are actually bound most tightly to snake venom of krait and cobra is what they're finding, and that the spike protein from SARS-CoV-2 is most identical to Chinese krait and king cobra venom. Then I find out that there's an actual doctor who works at the University of Pittsburgh in May.
This is insane right here.
May of 2020.
Yeah.
Works in a computational lab dealing with genetic sequencing. And he's been researching for 5 months. Sequencing of spike proteins. Trying to solve the mystery of SARS-CoV-2 victims. And he says he's got a big press release. They're going to actually announce all their findings. And Bing Liu is his name.
Setback in the quest to understand coronavirus after a researcher is shot and killed. 37-year-old Bing Liu was on the verge of making significant findings on COVID-19.
And that's when I freaked out. Also, all of the clippings in the media when they interview his boss, who is still at the University of Pittsburgh. Last name is Bahar. Every time he was interviewed, he said that they were going to publish the work they found through Bing Liu's work in their department. That's never been published. I'd like to know why. A year and a half later, that's never been published.
A year and a half now.
Where is it? And then all of a sudden, the realization came that this is the great lie. When I say that they have lied to you about everything in relationship to COVID, they've even lied about the viral part of COVID. Now, you have to understand here, my entire stance for the last year and a half has been to educate, warn people about hospital protocols because of a drug called remdesivir.
Right.
So, in this realization that this could all be related to venom, something bothered me in the January 21st EUA that came out from the FDA about remdesivir. In this 42-page document, it actually says there's only one drug that cannot be co-administered with remdesivir at the same time because it negates the antiviral properties of remdesivir, and that drug is hydroxychloroquine. In 2020, January, there's this incredible study that's published where there's been over like a 10-year period where a company has been funding a research study gene mapping all the genes of the venoms and proteins and peptides inside of king cobra venom. And in January 2020, they published their findings. Oh, ask me if I was shocked when I saw that it was 19 toxic venom proteins that they isolated that specifically target organs in your body. So I go to the
19.
funding part of this study, and I want to know, well, who funded this and how many companies? It says that the majority of the company's funding and studies funding came from a company called Genentech. Genentech is a subsidiary of a company called Roche. I don't know anything about these companies. Never even heard of them. The employees of Genentech, who were the authors of this study, said they have a conflict of interest because they actually hold shares and stocks in Roche. And all I did was go like this. This is not a joke. I was like, Genentech? I've never heard of Genentech. Is there a correlation between Genentech and Gilead? This is not a joke. I typed it on the internet. Is there a connection to Genentech and Gilead? Oh my God. Gilead bought 2 facilities that deal with biological studies from Genentech in 2011 and then brought 55 of their executives into Gilead in 2011, just when that King Cobra study started. Gilead is the manufacturer of remdesivir. Guess what's been known since 2005 blocks the nicotine receptors in the brainstem being injured by cobra venom and viper venom. Guess what drug? Hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. Remdesivir, packaged and stored as it is delivered to hospitals, comes in a little glass vial. It's called lyophilized powder. It actually has a white to yellowish tint. Guess what color snake venom has when it's stored? then to be diluted in sodium chloride or distilled water to be administered in an IV. Or if people are buying King Cobra venom lyophilized, they mix it in the same preparation as listed on the fact sheet for remdesivir to actually take cobra venom or any other viper venom and inject it into horses to make monoclonal antibodies. When you read the emergency use authorization for remdesivir, it states, this one from January 21st, that every practitioner who administers this to a COVID patient, pediatric or not, you have to evaluate for what's called prothrombin time. Prothrombin time means if it increases the prothrombin time, it means it's taking your blood's ability to coagulate and making it longer. So it thins your blood, you can't clot.
Right.
You will internally bleed to death. With remdesivir, it is stated on the emergency use authorization, every patient has to have its prothrombin time checked before you give it remdesivir and during treatment. Do you know what King Cobra venom does to the blood?
It makes it so that it can't clot.
It makes it so it can't clot. You know what one of the evidences is? It's prothrombin time. And if you look at the CDC's website and the NIH's website on the adverse events from remdesivir, called Veklury, it actually says it increases prothrombin time, which is exactly what King Cobra venom does to the human body. And remdesivir is lyophilized peptides, proteins of King Cobra venom. The University of Arizona published last summer a paper when they actually evaluated the blood samples and tissues of people who died, hundreds of them, from 2 different hospitals, after being treated for COVID, which means they got what drug? Remdesivir. When they evaluated their blood, the title of their published article is
Welcome back. Why do some people, seemingly perfectly healthy, die from COVID and others don't? It's a question baffling experts during this pandemic.
It sure is. And new research from the University of Arizona suggests we're closer to getting an answer. As Team 12's Jess Winters explains, it seems to boil down to an enzyme that's also found in rattlesnake venom.
What does this rattlesnake have to do with COVID-19 deaths?
We turned much of my research in my lab towards COVID a year and a half ago.
Chilton says he got blood samples from more than 100 patients in a New York ICU. They either had no COVID, a mild, moderate, or severe case of the virus. He did some fancy schmancy artificial intelligence in his lab and discovered 2 distinct patterns in the people who were dying from COVID.
These patterns, number one, told us that the vital organs were in trouble, but the other looked as if they were being attacked by some enzyme.
He says he then found the highest concentration of this enzyme that has ever been found in humans.
These levels attacking internal organs means multiple organ failure and death.
So where do the rattlesnakes come into play?
This enzyme is a humanized version, part of the same family as the active ingredient in snake venom.
In simple terms, this enzyme related to rattlesnake venom that's been found in humans is likely causing tremendous damage, leading to COVID-19 deaths.
and then they take you through all of the elevated enzymes in the blood samples of these people that are naturally found in rattlesnake venom and viper venom that are in levels they've never seen before. You want to know how they got there? 5 to 10 days of remdesivir. They've known since 2005 if you inject a mouse with cobra venom, you inject it like they're doing with remdesivir, injecting into your veins, it actually causes a cytokine storm in the lungs of all animals. I am convinced that COVID-19 is not a respiratory virus of any kind. It is actually venom poisoning, and they're using, I believe, synthesized peptides and proteins from venoms of snakes, and they're administering them and targeting them to certain people. Now, the amazing thing about these 19 toxins found in cobra venom, they're specifically sequenced to target specific organs, like the pancreas in a diabetic, like the heart in a heart disease patient. like the liver in a hepatitis patient.
Wait. So if I die because I'm a cancer patient, or if I die from some sort of liver-related function because I've had liver problems, if I die, then it'll be undetectable. It'll be untraceable. They're going to chalk it up. Of course this diabetic died.
This is the most original of all bioweapons ever. Snake venom. I mean, we know how poisonous snakes are. This is the most obvious bioweapon ever. When I say this is the most evil thing I've ever encountered in my entire life, could you ever have imagined that the one greatest symbol of evil in all of Christendom, what is the symbol of evil in Christianity?
The serpent.
The serpent. Can you think of anything more evil than envenomating the entire world with snake venom and then injecting snake venom into your veins and then using mRNA technology that they've been isolating from snake venom for years that they know are unusually stable, more stable than any other mRNA they've isolated from other natural organisms for decades. 2015, they took mRNA from cobra venom, crepe venom, and they actually wrapped the mRNA in nanoparticle hydrogel. How often have you heard about that with these new mRNA vaccines? And they made it even more stable. Then they actually added what's called dynabeads to those nanoparticle hydrogels surrounding the mRNA of snake venom, and it made it even more stable. It made it last longer. It made it easier to get inside of your cells. You know what dynabeads are? Magnetic metal nanoparticles.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
What's going on? Your prayers have been answered, Donald. Apparently I'm dying.
Rob, could you get him a chair, please?
No. I've been poisoned.
Poisoned? By whom?
Someone within my organization. Someone with access to an offshore account that was used to fund recent attacks against me. 11 people had access to that account. Last evening, I called those 11 to a dinner to confront them. What happened next, I only remember pieces. The restaurant, what it looked like, not where it was. I remember holding a glass of wine, but not drinking it, although I'm sure I must have. I need you to find the pharmacotoxicologist who I believe crafted the deadly cocktail and get the antidote from him.
What do you know about him?
There's a man who told me he's known as
The apothecary.
a druggist whose potions hijack the immune system, causing any number of allergic reactions. Each one impossible to identify unless you know what you're looking for. An exotic venom might replicate a drug overdose. A personally tailored allergic reaction might trigger cardiovascular collapse.
The apothecary can create embolisms, aneurysms, inhibit respiration, induce paralysis. We're looking for corticosteroids, bronchodilator. Go. All right.
corticosteroids.
I've lived my entire adult life surrounded by it. Corona of death. Some days I even long for it, but lately I find I'm unwilling to go gentle into that good night.
Bronchodilator.
That is the bad news.
There's good news.
The lab did find one distinct element in the molecular structure of the drops taken from Robert Dolly's apartment. A peptide unique to the venom of Bungaris flaviceps, also known as the red-headed kite.
When I saw this, I knew I was right. I knew I was supposed to see that because it was confirmation to me that other people knew this was planned all along, which we've known this is a plan.
Yes.
The FBI figures out that it's actually peptides found in crate venom that poisoned Reddington. In the show, you learn that he was poisoned by drinking. It was put in his drink.
Idiot.
And then I realized something. I realized how they've been spreading this.
It's going too fast. What are we missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8.
I've actually told my wife 6 months prior to this that it's very odd when you go on the CDC's website that they have this wastewater surveillance tab on the COVID data tracker site. And they have 400 water testing sites in 37 cities in this country. What no one knows is the data from the CDC between January of 2020 and September of 2020 in relationship to their water testing of these 37 cities. They only let people know they were doing it in September of 2020 and now are releasing that data. They now just announced 2 weeks ago, Walensky did, of the CDC, that they're now upping their water testing. They say, and have been reporting to media outlets, that how it works is they are PCR testing our wastewater because we, as we get COVID-19, are pooping it in the water, and we're going to test our wastewater, and we can tell a city when there's high amounts of SARS-CoV-2 in the water, they can actually tell that same community 4 or 5 days later is going to be an outbreak of COVID-19 in that city.
Wait a minute. That's backwards.
That is completely backwards. If a community has had SARS-CoV-2 go through their body, they already had their symptoms. When they eliminated the virus, supposedly the virus, out of their body and it ends up in your wastewater, you no longer have symptoms.
Right.
How could you know and then be able to confirm in the future, 4 to 5 days from now, when we find it in your wastewater supply from your city, when we see it being shed in your water, 4 to 5 days later, we can actually tell you there's going to be an outbreak in your city? It's not because there's an outbreak in that city. Just like in the show Blacklist. I had to break this down for every aspect of COVID. One thing that's been very unique to COVID is this sense of loss of taste and smell that lasts for months, even years. Holy cow. I had no idea. They already knew this did this to people. When you drink it, for the people who are the natural healers or the individuals who've got bitten, when they actually suck the venom of cobra into their mouth and then spit it out, they have this loss of taste and smell that can last 12 months, a year and a half. It's just from having it exposed in the mouth, which is exactly what's happening when it's being put into our water. Now, the thing about the water is this. They are using the water systems because they can target specific demographics. They are absolutely confident that the peptides they have chosen for COVID, circulated throughout the earth and throughout the populace, specifically targets, and the vaccines and the mRNA in the vaccines specifically target organs like your spleen, your pancreas for diabetics, that's a concern, brain tissue, liver tissue, lung tissue, and heart tissue. So if you already have a disease process of inflammation of any of those organs, you are the ones they're targeting.
So the people that work at my water treatment facility are aware of this? They're in on it?
No.
Okay.
No, the CDC's in on it. And the CDC is working with contracting companies to make sure they do it.
Mild and kind. Kent is kind tasting to your taste buds, kind tasting to your throat. So there's nothing to disturb your full enjoyment of the goodness of Kent's finest quality tobaccos. So get your taste buds back to normal.
There are nicotine receptors in your brainstem that control your diaphragm. Your diaphragm has to contract to be able to allow oxygen at all to get into your lungs. They are using crate venom and cobra venom, calling it COVID-19. You're drinking it, it's getting it into your brainstem, and it's paralyzing your diaphragm's ability to breathe. I cannot say this enough. In the very beginning of COVID, it was being reported around the world that the least demographic represented in hospitals being hospitalized for COVID-19 were smokers. Around the world, it was less than 5% of everybody in hospitals were actually smokers. And they found that odd only because this was a respiratory virus.
Doesn't make any sense.
Wouldn't it be that the people who are shoving tobacco and nicotine in their lungs would be more apt to be traumatized by a novel respiratory virus? But that's not what they saw. What was amazing is when this started getting reported in the first 6 months of COVID in 2020 around the world, guess what our federal government did? Anthony Fauci, the NIH, CDC, and the FDA all came out and started pumping in the media that there's no better time than right now to quit smoking. And they actually lied to you, and they lied to the entire world and said smokers are being hospitalized at rates higher than any other demographic. Well, the truth is, these nicotine receptors that are affected by cobra venom and crate venom that control your ability to breathe and was causing your oxygen levels to fall, that on a pulse oximeter looks like you have pneumonia. No, you weren't. You were being paralyzed. Actually, you couldn't breathe. And your heart rhythm was actually being dropped by the same receptors. Do you know that smokers, nicotine ties to those, and then cobra venom and crate venom can't bind to those receptors, so it can't paralyze your diaphragm? So they knew and were theorizing in France in April of 2020 when they figured out that it was the nicotine receptors that control the diaphragm's ability to breathe, was what the spike protein was targeting, because it most looked like the neurotoxin, neuro being brain, neurotoxin of crate and cobra venom. They started theorizing that studies need to be done that we start giving people nicotine to protect them from getting COVID. It absolutely is known that nicotine is protective against COVID-19 because it stops these venoms from damaging and connecting to these nicotine receptors in your brain that control your diaphragm's ability to breathe. But once you go into a hospital because you can't breathe, if you're not a smoker and you don't do the nicotine, they put you on remdesivir. Remdesivir is venom from a cobra. It's attaching itself to the nicotine receptors in your brain. You then can't breathe, and then at the same time, it destroys the inside of your lungs through what's called a cytokine storm. That is what cobra venom does.
We've got to get this guy on a ventilator, or this gal.
And then they say they got to put you on a ventilator. Why are they putting you on ventilators? They're putting you on ventilators because they're going to put you on sedation drugs to put you on the vent. And they can actually murder you by euthanizing you with drugs that act similarly to the venom.
Rip Rob Scaber.
They have to sedate you because when they go to shove a tube down your trachea to get into your lungs,
you'll pull it out.
You'll pull it out, or you'll fight them as they're trying to shove it in there. So they have to sedate you. So they use morphine, fentanyl, Precedex, lorazepam, or midazolam. Those 5 drugs act on the same centers of your brain that control the diaphragm's breathing and your heart's ability to breathe. These drugs are euthanizing drugs, and they actually will put you on these protocols at the same time they have you on remdesivir. The entire attempt is to slow down your breathing and your diaphragm, and you will die. They've got the cocktail down pat. The average person dies on day 9 of COVID-19 hospitalized treatment. They only authorize, per the NIH, 2 5-day treatments of remdesivir. It's amazing that the 9th day is the day that most people died. In February of 2020, the Wall Street Journal was allowed to produce an article, and they particularly speak to the word virus in coronavirus pandemic. And in this article, it actually states that the Latin definition historically for virus, originally and historically, virus meant and means venom. So I started to wonder, well, what about the name corona? Does it have a Latin definition or a definition at all? So I actually looked up what's the definition. And on dictionary.com, it brings up 13 definitions. Corona, religiously, ecclesiastically, means gold ribbon at the base of a mitre. And I didn't know what a mitre was. So I copied it and pasted it and then hit images. So this actually could read the Pope's venom pandemic. It also can read crown. Corona means crown also in Latin terms. Corona means crown. Visually, we see kings represented with a crown symbol. Right. So put that together for me. King, cobra, venom. It actually could read king, cobra, venom, pandemic. I've said this for about a year now that I actually believe this is more of a religious war on the entire world. I've been adamant about that, actually. The message of Christ forever was, he's the master healer. And faith precedes all miracles, not vaccines.
He made a blind man see.
Right.
He touched the leper.
So why are we actually putting more faith in drugs, and why is a man of the cloth supposedly putting more faith in science and a drug than he is in telling people to pray to God? God's greatest creation was you, and you are made up of a DNA strand of genetics that are unique to you. If I was going to do something incredibly evil, how ironic would it be that the Catholic Church or whoever would use the one symbol of an animal that represents evil in all religion, which is either the snake or the dragon, which is actually just a snake with legs. You take that snake or that serpent and you figure out how to isolate genes from that serpent and get those genes of that serpent to insert itself into your God-given created DNA. I think this is the plan all along, was to get the serpents, the evil ones' DNA into your God-created DNA. And they figured out how to do it with this mRNA technology. They're using mRNA, which is mRNA extracted from, I believe, the king cobra venom. The king cobra venom. And I think they want to get that venom inside of you and make you a hybrid of Satan, no longer just belonging to God or a creation of God's. When I say that the mRNA inside of the Pfizer Moderna shots is actually derived from snake venom, it just sounds crazy, right?
Yes.
But I want you to read. I want you to read from July 6th, last year, 2021, the co-founder of Moderna. Read the title, show it to the camera.
Moderna co-founder using mRNA technology to treat venomous snake bites.
It goes on to say that he's going to help create and co-found a company called Ophirix. Look it up. It's phenomenal. Ophirix. Ophirix is a brand new company based in San Francisco that actually is going to solely work on creating anti-venom drugs for snake bites. Guess who funds this thing? The whole company.
The Department of Defense.
The Department of Defense, the Wellcome Trust Fund, and the United Nations. Incredible. Okay. All right. So this is great. I just want.
Let's wrap our heads around that for a second. How many snake bite victims are there?
It's like 100,000 people.
100,000 people will die from snake bites, but this is enough for the CEO of Moderna to make that this is a huge issue. But not only that, but the importance for the Department of Defense and for the United Nations to get on board and to fund such a venture.
Dr. Hoff out of Canada, after evaluating his vaccinated patients, was able to determine those who had received the mRNA vaccines, they all had elevated D-dimers. And he checked that because they all complained of extreme fatigue, like long haulers COVID symptoms. And he was enlightened to do this D-dimer test and then found every single one of them had elevated D-dimers. Now, you to read on Medscape. I just printed this out from medscape.com. What is it that medical doctors are trained to look for when they see elevated D-dimers? So read the title, and I want you to read the 5th bullet point.
How are elevated D-dimer levels interpreted? Snake venom poisoning.
So even medical doctors are trained to look for elevated D-dimers and to know that this is a possible snake venom poisoning. And notice they didn't use the word snake bite victim.
Right.
Snake venom poisoning. And I was like, oh my God, it's in the mRNA shots for sure. This is why you're seeing this. They even talk about it on here that D-dimer is a reflection of fibrinogen and its ability to control coagulation. And that it's usually at normal low levels inside of people who are fine. But then these D-dimers get extremely elevated after snake
venom poisoning.
Keep getting
venom
wrong.
poisoning. The kidney failure caused by remdesivir is the #1 organ targeted by king cobra venom. It's the #1. There isn't anything in relationship to symptomatology of COVID-19, injuries post-COVID-19 vaccines, treatment with remdesivir that cannot be correlated back in research studies to venom from cobras, kraits, and other vipers.
So when somebody gets bit by a snake, particularly a king cobra or a krait, what is the long-term prognosis for these people? So these people that have been injected, this jab remorse, I mean, there's been a lot of people like Zev Zelenko, who I respect tremendously, has come out and said, you have a ticking time bomb inside of you. Is that true?
Yeah, your body's now had gene sequences put into you or peptides put into you of venom, and that actually continues, particularly one bite after another. Those disease processes become even more exaggerated. This is why they want to continue doing the booster shot program.
Whoa.
My wife and I are driving back towards our home, and it's late afternoon. We dropped her car off at a mechanic shop, and she said, you need to get something to eat because I'll get hangry, a little snippy. When I get hungry, it's like 2:30 in the afternoon. And she goes, would you like to eat? And I said, let's just go to this Chinese restaurant right here. And she looked at me, she goes, really? We haven't had Chinese food in years. I mean, it's been at least 5 years. So we go into this payway, order the food. I go to the bathroom. By the time I come out to the bathroom and sit down, my wife's already got the foods sat in front of her, the plates, and then there's 2 fortune cookies that Jane has selected out of a barrel. But my wife is a desserts first kind of girl. So when I sat down at the table, the fortune cookie's already open and she's already eaten it. And the fortune cookie's sitting there above her. The fortune is sitting above her plate. So I sat down, I look at her and I said, well, I guess I'll eat my dessert first too. Since you did yours, I guess I'll open up my fortune cookie. So I opened the fortune cookie and I cracked it open, and it's opposite the plate, across the plate. And when I cracked it open, the back of the paper of the fortune was facing me. And I quickly saw it as I separated the 2 ends, and I just spun it around real quick to face me. And I picked it up and read it to my wife, and it reads something like this. All of the world's greatest riches begin with 1 penny. I said,
How profound.
I looked at Jane, I was like, of course it does. Like, who doesn't know that, right? And I sat it down, and she's looking at me as she's eating. She's like, are you going to eat? And I was just staring at the actual paper, fortune. And I said, yeah, I'll eat in a minute. And she goes, what's wrong? And I said, it's what's on the back of that fortune cookie that's freaking me out. And usually you'll see like lottery numbers or something random on the back of those cookies. But what I noticed was the name on the back of that fortune. In parentheses on the back of that fortune, as soon as I opened it, are 2 names. I knew that God was telling me, you can't give up and you have to tell the world.
second while I try and get this stupid mouse to work. Yeah, come on, just move a tiny little bit, not a great lot. There we go. So compounds that protect against snake venom poisoning: nicotine, zinc, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, quercetin, NAC, vitamin C, copper, bentonite clay, corticosteroids, and budenoside, nebulized. So nebulized budenoside. Never heard of that one. Bentonite clay I'm quite familiar with. I've heard about the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine. And of course we know about nicotine. In fact, I think we can unzoom a little bit now. Now that, oh, come on. Technology just loves me so much. Yeah, I hope you found that quite interesting and educational, as did I. So I'm going to turn that little puppy off now. There we go. Very interesting. I always thought that the corona part actually talked about how when we were during lockdown they were putting down heaps and heaps of towers all around us, you know, extra phone towers for the 5G. So there's possibly a correlation there too with the 5G. They look like crowns, you know, the towers all around us. On top of them, they've got all their antennas up. I thought that had a bit to do with the corona as well. But I never really thought that the king cobra, we've been calling it the snake bite all this time. Yeah, wow, sort of blows my mind. You see how bloody much I suck at those Sudokus, man. Oh, I'm pissed off at myself. I got one right the whole time. I don't know why that one's not finished. I don't know what happened. I guess maybe it wasn't really about Sudoku after all. I was just killing time while I'm listening into it again. And normally I'll listen to stuff like that as I'm driving and make up my own mind. But today my generous boss has decided to give me an extra day off because I took yesterday off to do a YouTube live stream. And because I was honest about it, I don't see the point in lying about stuff. They gave me today off as well, so it's been a good day. I've been had a chance to do a lot of stuff, and when this came up on my Facebook feed, I thought I'm gonna, because you can't share it on Facebook, you know, as you saw right at the start. For those who did see right at the start, it's not just shadow ban. It's just fact checkers have said exactly what they said at the start of the video, that fact checkers will clamp down on stuff. You can't share facts, man. That's a fact. Fact checkers are going to fact that right off. It does my head in, really, because you know, I think I've always had a bit of an ability to see between the lines of just about, well, not everything, obviously. I mean, I grew up indoctrinated in all kinds of stuff, and yeah, we all have. We've all suffered one way or another, but the thing is, you can only deal with the cards that you're dealt with, you know, like you can't go and play an ace if you've only got a jack. It's just the way it is. So yeah, right from the moment the pandemic started, and yeah, I don't give a fuck, really, honestly, if I get shut down, because life will go on. I'm pretty certain, you know, I've sort of done enough clues, because, you know, this is a video about doing Sudoku. It's got nothing to do with nothing, no conspiracies or anything. We're just filling in the blanks here. And I think the ability to fill in the blanks is part of the person's ability of discernment that some people have better than others. And I'm normally really good at doing these Sudokus, and then I look at them and I'm going, how the heck did I know if 2 3s in the same row or the same box, and ordinarily I'm pretty good at looking at clues, maybe because I'm doing a live stream. Yeah, I do have a little bit of a nervous disposition. I don't know if you noticed that. I'm not just the cool, calm, laid back guru that the beard imposes or suggests. No, man, every day I learn something new, and sometimes when you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere and you've got nothing better to do because you've got no phone reception, you can't read your Facebook comments and, tease the trolls and set them up and call them glob idiots and all that sort of stuff. Well, sometimes you just got nothing better to do. You can read a book. Sometimes I do that, or sometimes I just sit and do Sudoku. So I just bought this book. It's got over 600 puzzles. It's not just 600, it's over 600. But it's got 601. Actually, let's have a look. Oh, no, it's got 624. That's pretty telling, isn't it? For anybody that knows about numerology. Today is actually the 22nd of the 8th too, so that's a 4-8 day. And I got up to puzzle 522, but I just jumped in a random spot and started. Where'd I start? Started at 5:15. And I got a few of those right. They were easy. In fact, I didn't really get to that one till I started the live stream, and then the next ones, I got them all wrong. All wrong. It's one of the things when you're under pressure, is for me, my brain doesn't work the same as to when I'm just sitting quietly, all alone, doing something, meditating or whatever. It's a form of meditation. I'm not really one of those to sit in the lotus position and stare at the end of my nose. But driving can be a form of meditation for me, and that way I can listen because I'm not speaking. If I'm speaking, I can't really listen, and I can't read and speak at the same time unless I'm speaking what I'm reading. Like some people, you can watch them, they're sitting reading the live chat while they're doing a debate. And I'm going, how the hell can you do that, man? Like, my brain doesn't do that. My brain focuses one thing at a time. But what it also does then is it focuses clearly on a thing at a time. And then when I'm relaxed and asleep or in my dream state or whatever, I wake up in the morning and it's put all those little things together and given me a newer understanding, a better way of understanding. So sometimes I'll reject a new idea. Like at the moment, I'm still rejecting the idea of the moon map. A lot of people talk about the moon map being a reflection of the Earth and some of the greater continents. And when I first saw that, I thought, oh, wow, that's an awesome idea. And I look into that. And the first thing I saw is between Australia and South America, instead of the Pacific Ocean, a huge, empty, vast ocean, they've got a continent that's bigger than, or as big as nearly all of Asia put together. And I'm like, I think we might have noticed if there was a continent the size of that by now, when really we've got New Zealand, and then if you keep on going, there's Pacific Ocean, and about 5 gabillion and a bit miles later, you got the Easter Islands, and then it's more ocean. South America. So, there's really not a lot there. So, even though I'll entertain any idea, but I can sniff bullshit out in a second. And when it comes to the moon map, it didn't take me long before I went, it was just bullshit. Yeah, sorry for those people that like the moon map. So something's went wrong again. Let's tap to retry. I'm always getting that. I'm not seeing any messages either if anybody sent one now because of that. But don't matter. What I can do, now that the important stuff is finished, and now I'm just filling in time, I might even be able to, let's see, close that, open that. So I couldn't go live. I tried to go live off my laptop. I was just going to have the phone sitting behind me and play that video, but it didn't work that way, so I just went the other way. Oh, come on. Bloody, this mouse, I tell you. I'm not a tech person. You can probably tell. I'm not sure, but if I just click that and mute that, rightio, now I can see the awesome. Now I can see the chat. 2 whole people, awesome. G'day, Flat Earth stuff, and V Thomas back again. Nicotine, yeah, I know. Isn't that mad? That nicotine would actually be one of those things that, yeah, this is actually interesting because I've never been a smoker of tobacco at all. At all, I absolutely loathe the stuff. I can't stand it. I'm allergic to it. It will make me sick. No word of a lie. Like I used to like smoking a little bit of green back in my day, and if I was at a party or gathering of people, I'd just say, yeah, we're all gonna have a little bit of a chop and the bong and all that. I say, look, man, just I know you got to mix it with tobacco to make it go far with everybody, but just don't give me tobacco, please. Look, I'll just have a tiny little half a cone, and I'll be happy. I didn't need tobacco, and so they might have 3 or 4 cones each because they mixed it with tobacco, and they're happy as well. So one of the benefits of that when you've got good friends is they just give you your little half cone, you've had your little smoke, and then everybody else is sitting around waiting for theirs. But meanwhile, I'm like, woohoo, happy. But when you got bad friends, assholes, they'll say, he won't notice any different. So they'll pack it full of tobacco and then just put a little bit of green on top, and then you smoke. I just go, you didn't, did you? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? You've just ruined my whole night. And within 10 minutes, I'll just be outside throwing up. My body reacts to nicotine like that. However, I do know a lot of people that do smoke tobacco, and a lot of them only smoke tobacco when they're smoking their bongs or whatever. And each to their own is my theory on that. But I noticed that when the chemtrails are really hammering down on us really hard, is that apparently there's also something in tobacco that made people more immune to what they're putting in the chemtrails, which I think is like the nanobots and possibly even some of this snake venom stuff. Who knows? They can put in the water, they can put in the air. There's all sorts of stuff, and that is when they really started clamping down on the anti-smoking movement and the what's the other word I'm looking for here? Making people stop smoking. Oh, that's right, tax. That's when they started taxing the absolute shit out of tobacco. Now they keep on taxing everything, alcohol and tobacco and whatnot, and it's a huge money raiser for them. But for people that smoked cigarettes, all of a sudden the price went up to like $1 a cigarette, which back then was huge. Like you could buy a pack of 40 for like, I don't know, $20 or something. And then the price doubled, and then it doubled again. And most people I know today who smoke, which in the industry I work in is most traffic controllers, people stand on the stop slow map. Most of them are smokers. And so most all of them, the minute they get a bit of a break, is they start rolling their own smokes, because that's the only way affordable now for the average smoker to smoke tobacco and get their nicotine fix is by rolling their own, whereas, back when I was younger, that was really the poor man's way of doing it. Everybody bought tailor-mades. So, yeah, there's a lot of things I could go into about that, but apparently something in the nicotine, or something about the properties of nicotine, is actually healthy. And also then, back in the day, like even when I was a little child, my dad would actually smoke the odd rolly cigarette. He was never a heavy smoker, but he would smoke occasionally. And in fact, any place you went to as a kid, all the adults would be sitting inside smoking, and it was not a big deal, but it wasn't nearly as toxic back then. In fact, it was quite a pleasant smell, especially if you're outdoors and he smokes the cigarette and everything. And, his uncle, so my great uncle, he'd also be sitting there with a pipe when we'd go to visit him, Uncle Jack. He'd smoke the pipe tobacco, and it was a pleasant smell. It was not unpleasant at all. Whereas now, when I smell somebody smoking a cigarette, it's disgusting. It's really bad. So, yeah, they're adding stuff to stuff. And here's another one for you, because I've been trying to buy pure alcohol lately because I want to make tinctures just out of herbs, and I'll make one out of cannabis as well, don't get me wrong, but making a tincture out of a herb is basically a simple matter of taking a glass bottle or whatever, putting some herbs into it and adding some alcohol to it. And if you sort of shake it once or twice a day, don't even have to do that really. It extracts the medicinal properties out of the herb. And it's one of the purest ways of getting it if you need it medicinally. So for those who need THC, whatever, for pain medicine medicinally, that is one way of extracting it without having to smoke it. The alcohol actually extracts the good stuff. And you'd probably find that back in the day, before it was even banned and made prohibited, most of your pharmaceutical medicines were based on cannabis. It was would be 6% or 16% or whatever the percentage was of this medicine. Some of them even had opioids in it, whatever the case might be. And it was a tincture. It was an alcohol-based tincture, which is where the expression comes from back in the day. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, because it just sweetens it up. Because alcohol burns, especially as a child. You get, medicine's horrible. So some things do taste bad. So back to where I was getting at, trying to buy alcohol. You can't buy in Australia pure alcohol. If you do, you're going to pay through the nose, or you actually have to get a license, and you have to make a note of everything you made from it and used it and how you dispensed it and all the rest. So you have to be basically a medical practitioner to get just 99.9% ethyl alcohol. You can buy this stuff on eBay and stuff, and it's not that expensive. But every single one of it will say denatured. You get 95%, you can get 99% denatured. So what are they doing? They're doing exactly what they did back in the Prohibition days. They're adding a poison to it to make it unpalatable. I don't know how to pronounce that word exactly, but to make it taste yuck. That's what they're doing to what? Alcohol is a naturally fermented product. All you're really doing is taking sugar, any form of sugar, and adding yeast to it. And that will ferment it into alcohol, and then distillation can purify it until the point you get pure alcohol. And most of the time, for people who do drink spirits, once you've got your pure alcohol, is you water it down so it's no more than about 40%. Because any more than that, it is toxic. But if you're using it for medicine and stuff, you can use any form and you can still water it down. Just have to take a higher dose. So Crest or Colgate. So what they're doing is they're denaturing pure alcohol so that you can sell it publicly, for, on the cheap. And they're basically making it toxic, which is what they did in Prohibition days when they didn't want anybody to be drinking. They poisoned the alcohol. So they're actually killing people drinking alcohol, which it's a human thing to do. It's we're all human. Nobody's perfect. Some don't drink alcohol at all. Some drink some amount of alcohol. Some drink a lot of alcohol, and it can be addictive. It can be a problem. I'm sort of teetering on the edge between alcoholic and severe alcoholic. So I know my position. I know where I stand, and so I just ensure that I don't overdo it. Is my thing, and it works for me. Each to their own is what I say. But what I would like to do is just get some pure alcohol and make a tincture out of some really good cannabis. And all you need then is like a half of a nip medicinally, and you're going to be in a pain-free, happy state, and you won't feel like drinking anymore. So I think it can be a really good thing, but does the government let you buy it? Nope. If I want to buy a still, looking at buying a distillery, to do it in my own kitchen, you're looking at the better part of $1,000 in most cases. The ones on eBay, you can't find anything cheaper than $999. It's like, far out, man. A bottle of vodka, $30, if you're lucky these days, a 700ml bottle. That's 40% alcohol. So by the time you make your tincture and do it out of that, that's probably the cheapest way of doing it, buying your bloody cheap alcohol from Aldi. In fact, that blew my mind when I went to the States first time. I'm just ranting, so it's not going anywhere. When I went to the States the first time, and I was 16 as an exchange student, and we're just going down the supermarket aisle, and how we got those freezer sections, you can walk in and you look down into the freezer section. Well, in the row between the freezers, standing, lined up all the way down, there were different liqueurs and shit. I'm like, what? In a supermarket? You don't get that in Australia. And it was like a 6 litre, like a plastic bottle, like we'd buy milk in certain places here in Australia, a 2 litre bottle of vodka for $6. And I'm like, holy shit, man, that would be like at least $20 back in Australia. We wouldn't even sell it in a 2 litre bottle. The biggest you can buy is like a 1 litre. So at least the States had some sense. It's like, well, if somebody wants to be an alcoholic and wants to ruin their lives and wants to kill themselves or ruin their liver, whatever, why not just let them? That's my attitude, is let people do as they will and let them suffer the consequences. And then if they're going to kill themselves, we'll say, here, here's a shovel, you can make your burial even cheaper, dig your own grave, you got to teach some sort of common sense somewhere along the line. So, so to tie this back into my little Sudoku rant here about the video I just shared, never really thought about it, how we call it the snake bite. And it turns out that maybe intuitively the human collective consciousness was tuned into the fact that, it really is. It's not just about the injection itself being equivalent to a snake bite. It's actually got genuine snake venom in it. And when they said that there was 19 different, I don't think pathogens is the right word, but I'll have to listen to it again to remember the exactly right words for it, but I think it could be pathogens. The fact that there was 19 of them and the coronavirus was COVID-19, there's so many things about it, like not to mention, cove, undercover, ID, the whole ID card about it. I better not say too much, I guess. I might have to go over to Rockfin. Everybody follow over to Rockfin and give me $10 a month. Sorry, can't help myself. You follow them over to Rockfin and they're still doing the same old lame stuff that they're doing on YouTube anyway. Don't know what the whole point is. But anyway, so I've put up the video that I wanted to be seen. I think I made my point. If I have an actual topic to go live that I'd want to talk about myself personally again, because I don't know if anybody really knows my full background story, but the very reason I moved to this area in the first place is because it's renowned for the alternative lifestyle, the huge number of alternative health practices, and the fact that at the university you could study naturopathy, which is pretty much what I thought would be a good thing to do so that I could work as a naturopath. And as it turned out, it seems like it's actually not the best idea ever. Whatever sort of mainstream education you're going to get, you're just going to get how shall I put this politely, brain fucked. They're just going to fuck with your brain. So whatever credentials you come out with will basically add up to meaning, even though you've got better intentions, you're obliged to follow the guidelines that they set for you, or you'll lose your license. You won't be able to practice. I mean, look at what happened to Brian Mullins. He was an engineer, qualified engineer, and because he started publishing flat earth stuff, some wanker, that George, whatever his fucking name was, part of my English, some George bloke reported him to whatever you call it, the board of engineers and stuff, and so it sort of threatened his livelihood. I mean, if you're good at your job, it shouldn't really matter what you think outside of your job. Just don't sort of mix the two. Do your job. Outside of that, have your opinions, have your philosophy, really question the science. Really, that's what science is all about, is questioning everything and being able to publicly broadcast your opinion, even if it is just a question, saying, well, I can see how flights and that might work. The Earth is flat. You didn't know that? Of course I knew that, bloke. Ordered stuff from Temu again. I ordered quite a bit of stuff from Temu, but the clock, I ordered that off the other one. One of the other ones, mental blank. Can't think because AliExpress. One of the many versions of AliExpress. I got it from it, and it took a little bit longer. It took about 2 weeks. And then it said you have to use specific batteries. So I was like, oh, freaking hell, I've only got alkaline batteries. I don't use alkaline batteries, use carbon batteries. So I thought, what the hell's the difference between an alkaline and a carbon battery? Look at it. Okay. Bought carbon batteries off eBay, $6 for 12 pack or something. So now it's got a carbon battery in it. So my new love, soon she's younger, la la la, need rest. No worries, bro. You take care, eh? I know I'm just here ranting. I wasn't here to actually make a particular rant about a particular topic. I just really wanted to share that video in the background under the premise of doing Sudoku, which I sucked at. So take care, man. Thanks for dropping by, eh? Flat stuff earth. I would have I guess flat earth stuff was already taken, was it? Cheers, bro. Surprised my new little kitten hasn't come running out to me yet. Tut tut. She's pretty good. When I call her, she usually comes, but she only wants to sleep through the day and then run around rampant through the night and drive me nuts. So, all right, where was that? So yeah, alternative, or actually realistic health is pretty much my number one goal in life in general. And I grew up in a pharmacy household, so my mother was a pharmacist. My first sort of kid's job was working in the pharmacy, stamping the prescriptions behind the counter to earn a bit of pocket money. And then eventually I got old enough to serve behind the counter and that sort of stuff. And then when we moved away and my mother actually bought a pharmacy, that's when I moved to the coast from the country. It was quite interesting because every week she'd get the newspapers delivered from our old hometown in Bathurst, and sort of once a month or something she'd get a pile of them, and over the weekend whatever she'd just pour through them and read some of the things and read the obituaries, and every single time she'd be reading something and be like, oh, this person died, oh, George Jeffries or whatever his name might have been, he was a customer of ours. Oh, this person died, that was another customer. Oh, here's another customer. Yeah. All the customers were dying because they were following the mainstream pharmaceutical strategy. Go to the doctor goes, oh, you've got pain, let's not address the cause of your pain, let's just give you some painkillers and you can keep going on and being a good slave. So take some painkillers, don't address the cause. And that's what did my head in, is if you're not addressing the cause, and of course in the ultimate scheme of things that prevention is better than cure. So you can take drugs to suppress the symptoms, but if you don't address the cause, then you're going to have to keep taking more and more drugs until eventually you're dead. That's just the way it goes. So I just thought, well, why not prevent illness in the first place? And that's what I hoped naturopathy would be about, but it turns out it's just an alternative form of pharmacology, really. It's just a bit more herbal, a bit less effective, a bit more laughed at by mainstream, because especially what's the one, homeopathy, where the idea of that is, and in fact, a friend of mine, she was married to a homeopath who, unfortunately, he ended his life early. But she was telling me one time how he made the remedies, and it was all to do with how much you diluted it and stirred it a certain number of times, and then diluted it again and stirred it again, and to the point where people do ridicule it because it's just basically water with a millionth of a part of a particular plant in it. But these days it's actually considered quite sensible to microdose, which sort of stems back to the homeopathic way of doing things, is that sometimes less is more. And I've sort of taken that principle with my own body too, is in that if I feel I've got a shortage of a certain thing like magnesium or royal jelly, all the different B vitamins, is that when you starve your body of a certain nutrient, then your body's going to take in 99.9% of what you put back into it, because your body is starving for it. It really wants it and needs it. So a really starving person eating, say, one orange might save their entire life because they're so lacking in vitamin C and the various nutrients involved. Whereas on the other hand, if you lived in an orange grove and you ate 50 oranges every day, your body says, man, I'm getting too much of this stuff. I've got to keep flushing it out, flushing it out, flushing it out. So you end up just peeing it all or pooping it all out. And you're training your body then how it should react to the basic building blocks of what you're taking in every day. So in a sense, the less you take in daily of essential trace nutrients especially, the more your body's actually going to use them. I've never quite gotten into that urine therapy side of things. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I've seen a lot of people that swear by it, and I've seen some very healthy looking people that live by it, and I've seen some people that look to be totally wasting away from it. And I just figure, well, fresh is best. And yeah, once I've eaten something and filtered it through my bodily system, I think it's probably best just to let it keep going and get a fresh source, my personal opinion. But I'm open to the idea. I think that urine therapy might have some benefits somewhere, but it's not something I'm going to try or willing to try at this stage in my life. So anyway, I'm going to go. I'm all exhausted. I didn't read the... You're still here, flat Earth, flat stuff Earth. Triangle lover, sussy. Don't know exactly what that means, but it was an unusual time to go live. I'll normally try and do mine when I do it on a weekend. Today's a Tuesday, 22nd of September. It is 4:07. Your purple triangle sus. All right, no worries. As long as you got one too. That's all good, I guess. Anyway, take care. First part of this video while I'm doing Sudoku, I think was the important part. And I'll see you around, eh? And take care. Let's see if I know how to end this now, because I can do it on the little buttons. No, not that one. That's the wrong one.